Sup, everybody? This is Karak with ACG. Every single time I wake up now and I look at news in 2020, I'm just like, yeah, you know what? Checks out. It really, nothing surprises me. So this morning when I woke up and I realized that somehow EA had bought Codemasters and CD Projekt Red had realized that there were bugs in their games, hey, you know what? It wasn't that surprising. Let's begin. We're going to talk about 2 bits of data, and then I'll break into a little bit of a podcast type format at the very end to discuss these in more detail. First thing I want to talk about, 1.2 billion. Now, 1.2 billion, I believe that's what Zappos got from Amazon and Zox got from Amazon for their hardware and software. That's actually what AstraZeneca got from the United States government for working on a grant for the vaccine. That is also what Codemasters just got from EA. So somehow, like Nickelback sneaking into the Grammys and getting some kind of award from a more talented artist, EA went in there and snuck it out and basically stole it from 2K. Now, 2K offered, I think, $970 million for this, and then EA snuck in, offered a little bit more, and got it. You'll also remember, or maybe you won't, that EA also bought the developers for Project Cars 3. The reason why you probably won't remember is that Project Cars 3 absolutely sucked and no one pretty much cared. But EA now has Need for Speed. It's got Dirt and Grid. It's got Formula One, pretty much all the racing. So if you're taking out bets for how long it takes for EA to walk one of these guys behind the woodshed and disappear the company like Jimmy Hoffa, I'll take that bet. Good luck to anybody, though, at Codemasters. And hey, I wish you well. The next thing we're going to talk about is CD Projekt Red agrees with me. Corpo, all the way. So CD Projekt Red released an announcement this morning about the game and its current state, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Now, as always, don't take out any aggression or issues you may have on some random person on Twitter. They don't treat you personal in any way from a company standpoint. You shouldn't treat them personally from a consumer standpoint. They aren't always saving babies from floods, nor are you throwing babies in floods so the company will save them. I don't know, not a good analogy. But regardless of all that, you also shouldn't attack some poor random Joe who just loves the internet and likes their job at a company. It just doesn't make any sense. Knock it the fuck off. Also, some people are going to be like, but I don't have any bugs. That's awesome. But guess what? The devs themselves are introducing this actual announcement to state that they know that there's so many bugs. It's a large enough issue that they're actually going out there and making sure people know that they can request refunds and basically telling people, stick with us, even though that makes absolutely no sense because most of us stuck with you 6 years prior to its release, but we'll get to that in a second. So I'm going to break this down and sort of how all this came about, but also the process real quickly in 3 different ways. I'm going to talk about the process itself, the product, and the PR. Now, when it comes to the process, as I've discussed in past videos, not always having code is, for a particular platform, I would say, not completely abnormal. In fact, it's mostly normal. There's nothing really unique, nothing really special about that kind of situation. But that's why most of the videos that I do, I state something like code wasn't available on this platform or something like that. This is adjusted and sort of altered depending on the timeliness of the review embargo itself, how close it is. So Cyberpunk was close enough that it made sense there might be an issue, which is one of the reasons why I refused that review code or the streaming code that went live a couple days before, because so many things had just gone completely off the rails. In addition, unless you're asked as a reviewer and you refused, most people who are reviewing a game won't know what platforms are really available. They'll state what platform they want many moons prior to that, many months usually, where you're filling out forms and stating what you want. So them knowing and not knowing is really just investigative, or perhaps talking to people, which NDAs tell you not to talk to people, but what have you. And I've discussed all this in more depth in the Horizon Zero Dawn video about embargo, as well as the Friday podcast. We always talk about it. So also rest assured, each company handles PR and code a different way, some better, some worse than this. This is not the be-all, end-all of situations. Now, I want to debunk one thing, or at least draw attention to it and then sort of debunk, and that's that a huge number of people are starting this weird conspiracy, and I saw it in my Discord where people were saying CD Projekt Red courted streamers and such on purpose to get away with this. That would have been done prior to any of the, any of the polishing moments, because you have to actually have content to polish. So they would have actually created that content and then polished it later. While, yes, that is a way to get a large number of people sort of excited about your product, these two things are not related. And that's totally acceptable as long as that person is never stating the quality of the content because they're in the content, which would be really weird, especially if they had a particular, a large audience. That's fine. Those kind of things, some people want to show up in those, but for example, if I was in something, I would never review it. I would probably say nothing else than I'm in something and just push it off, because at that point, if you're giving any kind of statement, this is awesome or this is cool or this is terrible, I don't know why you'd say that. You would probably have to put sponsored on that. Now, let's talk about the product. So the product, we're going to jump into this and we're going to discuss why CD Projekt Red released this and released this weird PR statement. It really is, as a game, in an unfinished state. It is the buggiest game so far that I've ever had to review, and that means it beats Unity, which blows my mind. But I do want to discuss what a bug is so people understand and how that's different from, let's say, a stopper. So a bug is something that is a failure of the code. This results in like a negative player feedback loop, but it's not something like a pathing issue, not so much unless it affects immersion consistently like Unity did. But when you start getting quests that won't tick off or freezes on load screens or bugs that won't let you continue, those become a higher category of bug and something that I definitely do put in the summary, and that will for sure be informed to the gamer as well as affect the review. Now, bugs so far as of this morning is crazy. Be aware, these are specified by my channel on how I report bugs and my guidelines for the channel that I've had since day one. Pretty much anybody reviewing any type of game should have a ton of guidelines for how they go about to make sure that they're fair and honest and they're following particular rules. These are mine. I'll flash them up on the screen. But I can tell you just from memory, I had some crazy stuff. First of all, the HDR is completely broken. It's broken. It just doesn't work. I've had 9, 10, I think 10 of this as of this morning crashes to the actual desktop on PC, 15 loading new errors on PC and console combined, meaning when you go to a new spot, textures just simply never load, no matter what. I've come back, I've circled around, done an event, done some kind of battle, came back, not there. We've also had the police spawn bug, or police spawning, I don't know what you'd call it, program situation that occurs in there where police can spawn in the air, they can spawn on top of buildings. It's crazy when you get in a battle that the enemies will just spawn everywhere in some sort of really casual way in which they want to handle the police system. So that really does impact immersion. It may not be considered a bug when I do the review. I'm going to look at it closer. And about 80% of the time, NPCs do nothing when you're in the street. Their lips won't move for lip syncing. This is something you can see on any stream. It was funny, too, because I jumped into a bunch of streams, many with thousands upon thousands of people streaming, and people were asking them, they were like, hey, man, how's the game? And they're, oh, it's fine. And I've had no bugs. And you're watching as, like, cars are flying into the sky or people are disappearing in front of them. And you're just like, really? But each person looks at these things differently. And, some people, that's just not what they're doing. I'm reviewing a product. Some people are just streaming. That's not the thing that they're actually looking for. But looking for something, let's discuss the PR for a second. Let me highlight that PR is handled differently by different companies. This isn't too strange. There's some great companies out there handling PR, some not so good. It's not really crazy to see how it's handled differently by CD Projekt Red than somebody else. People told in an embargo to not draw attention to bugs, nor repeatedly show them, and in some cases to inform gamers that those will be fixed, is also not necessarily hugely new. It's not some kind of surprising development. The last few times I've encountered this was mostly streamer NDAs, because you have a streamer NDA a lot of times in a review NDA, and the streamer NDA sometimes comes earlier. They'll be like, only stream 2 or 3, levels, and then do this and tell people that those bugs that they see will most likely be fixed, or these specific bugs. And that's what I'll do, is I'll look closer to that language. And if they say these specific bugs and list them, hey, you know what? That makes sense. They've seen those bugs. However, and this is something that sort of got me on this 2 years ago, sometimes you'll see that review, that NDA for a streamer, and it'll say, just tell everybody everything will be fixed. At that point, if you're signing that NDA, you might as well put sponsored behind everything, because that makes no sense. No one knows every single bug, and it just makes no sense to even say that on any kind of stream. So this is also something that I want to bring up. You always see this conspiracy theory about paid for reviews, which is I really haven't run into those very much. There's a couple Chinese companies, a couple international companies that they'll sort of hint around particular ways and sort of try to get you into things. And I've always just refused them and moved on. I've talked to you about those a couple times. That's really not the thing. But what I do run into time and again is this worry or hesitation to report bugs as immersion killers, to work through the code regardless of those bugs and to fight through something and to sort of ignore them. This is something that we saw in AC Unity. We saw it in Far Cry 5's horrendous spawning and AI issues. And it's in Cyberpunk. It's in Halo. This is Days Gone, day one, which was crazy. And seeing something like this in CD Projekt Red's announcement about we would appreciate if you gave us a chance, those chances were 6 years ago. And I think that day one, you pay $60, or prior to that, you pay $60. It's really not a chance anymore. This would just be sort of throwing away your money for a game that isn't complete for those people who are having issues. And I'm not going to really pretend that CD Projekt Red isn't great with after launch support and why we should expect that. There are a massive number of people working at that company that should be utilizing themselves as support for bugs, but that's like being surprised that many planes carry many passengers. You don't celebrate that, and you don't really celebrate the fact that they require that. They also stated that they had one patch prepped and another for after the holidays, meaning that if your patch doesn't fix these issues, little Jimmy's not going to be playing this game for Christmas, which I think is really pretty sad. I think for gamers, you usually expect a relatively bug-free product, and that brings me to my last point. As I was informed recently, I've discussed with many people, they just don't feel prepared to discuss bugs in some kind of coverage. I'm not sure what to say to that, but I would say get comfortable because these are not unique. The situation is not new, and it's been a repetitive problem that we've had multiple times, and that really disturbs me. So anyway, that's my 2 bits of basic news. I'm going to jump into this in podcast form a little bit more and I'm going to talk first about Codemasters and getting purchased by EA. So a lot of people do bring up, and by the way, if you get a chance, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Follow me on Spotify. If you want to leave now, hey, go ahead. It'll ruin my watch time, but if you want to stick around, I'm just going to break these down a little bit more. So Codemasters buying or getting bought is just another event where we're seeing a lot of these companies end up under the umbrella of EA, which has had what I would consider to be a fairly tumultuous kind of history with purchasing developers. And a lot of people will look at Microsoft and say the same thing. And I look at Microsoft and I'm like, well, at least a lot of those companies are still there. When you look at EA, it's just a graveyard. It's just a graveyard. And there's enough issues. It's going to be interesting to see what they pull off and how they want to go forward, because I've always felt that there's a DNA for a lot of companies' games. Dirt, right? Grid, even Formula One. There's something about them. And there's something about those games that you can sort of go, I get it, right? Like, I know who this is from. Just like a Ubisoft game, whether you like them or dislike them, a lot of times you go, I sort of know where that's from or who that's from. And I want to see how if EA is going to change that, because it hasn't been a great track record for them. And Codemasters as a whole, I've been pretty happy with their output and I think that they're not necessarily super high quality on all of their titles, but quality enough on many of their titles that I like their output, and I really wouldn't want that to change very much. And I think with 2K, there was a higher chance of them just sort of being their own thing and moving forward. Now, we don't know. This could all change, right? This could all change, and suddenly, magically, they're just given free reign, and we see no changes whatsoever. But then you have to wonder why a company buys them for that much money for no reason, to not change them and to not maybe take some of their talent and move it around. Maybe we'll see new racing types introduced, but I certainly don't want to see the death of the games that they have released in the past, because I pretty much like most of them. And the next thing I want to talk about in more of a podcast form is these reviews in this situation. It sucks, guys. It sucks because I think a lot of people look forward to this game and a lot of people are enjoying it. And I think, when somebody sees a video like this, they're like, oh man, it's negative, blah, blah, blah. It is a negative situation. And the company agrees it's negative because they're the ones who actually released the stuff, the announcement. So that's on you to go talk to them if you disagree. But to those people who bought this game and who looked forward for multiple years, you're looking down the barrel of a bug just waiting to happen. And, I get that some people don't notice those and some people do. And I get that some people can ignore them. One of the things I've always stated about bugs that's always shocked me is how few people want to talk about them when it comes to coverage of any kind. Of impressions, I've even covered them in previews. I mean, not like a crash or something like that in a preview if it's months ahead of time, but if you're just noticing something that maybe appears like it could be a bug or it could be a shallow feature, more shallow than they're admitting, that kind of thing. And then, of course, when you get into reviews, it's even more so. When you get into streaming, it's more so. Even if I stream a game, you guys know me, if I'm streaming, I'm pretty much reviewing it anyway. Like that's, you'll hear me batting onto something and bitching about something or loving something. If I see it in a review, I really can't keep quiet about the things that I like or dislike when it comes to those. But I just really hope that we can get out of this. CD Projekt Red does have good support for after time support. I have heard people say Witcher 3 was buggy as well. It was nowhere near. I did go and check. I looked at some SEO stuff. I looked at videos, all kinds of stuff. It was definitely buggy, but it's not even close to the massive level that we're seeing with this current game. And as somebody who's a big Cyberpunk fan, I can't wait to see them patch this up to really get an idea of what it's going to offer. My review will be done before most of these patches fix anything, but I definitely want to experience this at some point. Once it's fixed up, maybe once some DLC adds some life to that city and some other issues that we see. It's just... always remember, there's a lot of games out there. Phoenix Rising's out there. If you're thinking, hey man, I might wait till this gets patched up a little bit, check that out. There's a lot of games that have come out under the radar. Call of the Sea, and you might just want to look at those, because spending $60 on something that may just be a technical disaster for you might not be the best bet. It's up to you, right? Everybody is different. All I got to say is this. I hope you guys all have an excellent week. I hate to have to report news that seems overly negative, but this has been an overly negative situation, and I'm not going to cower from it regardless. So anyway, that's it from me. If you get a chance, subscribe. I would love for you to go to Facebook and Reddit and Twitter and all that. Follow me on Twitter. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.